Hello, I'm Jered and you're about to listen to a BBC Trending podcast. But before you do, just a heads up, it's audio, only audio. So stick this on while you're cooking dinner, walking the dog or in the bath, or just stare at a blank screen for 23 minutes. We're trying something new here and we hope you'll like it. Enjoy.
There are some things most rock stars would love to achieve when they're starting out. Thousands of adoring fans to follow their every move on numerous social media accounts. Record deals, awards, international tours. And on the face of it, that's exactly what hard metal musician Jered Threatin appeared to have. Rock news websites were writing about him. Comments on his YouTube clips would say how amazing he was live, and women wanted to get friendly with him for being a sexy rock god. On the face of it. Except it was all a lie. An entire career and persona created online that fooled everyone because it was entirely fabricated. I'm Anisa Subedar, and this is the BBC Trending podcast, where we take a deep dive into the world of social media and online culture. Jered Threatin is the singer and sole full-time member of the rock band Threatin. A few months ago, he was exposed for being a fake. His social media presence, online fame and fan base were purely fictitious, and he soon went from being a credible musician to a laughingstock of the rock world. Jessica Lussenhop is from the BBC's Washington DC bureau and extensively covered the story. She's one of the few journalists who have met Jered Threatin and his wife Kelsey at their home in California.
Everyone wanted to talk to him. Everyone wanted to find out if he was willing to cop to the fact that he had fabricated all these people and entities in order to pull this tour off, if he would be sorry, if he would be ashamed, if he had some explanation.
Born in Moberly, Missouri in the US, Jered Eames, as he was known, had dreams of being world famous. He shared his father's love of rock music and was introduced to bands like Metallica and Black Sabbath. He started playing guitar when he was about 10 years old, and by the time he got to high school, he and his older brother Scott formed a band playing metal. In 2007, they released an EP called Decaying Heads of the Holy. Jered took being in a band very seriously, not just in the music, but also the look. He wears a lot of black, t-shirt, trousers, footwear, and he has this signature long hair that goes past his waist.
He says he's been dressing this way and growing his hair out since he was 12 or 13. And he actually showed me some old photos of himself where he's wearing all black.
But being in a band with his brother didn't come without problems. Scott felt Jered was taking it too seriously, and Jered felt Scott was too soft in his musical vision and wasn't treating it like a potential career. Scott wanted to play a softer rock along the lines of bands like Queen, but Jered had a vision that was heavier and more metal-based in sound. They were musically at odds with one another, and that took its toll.
I think feels the same way. They both were sort of misfits who didn't have a lot of friends, who put together a band together for a brief time, but then ultimately splintered pretty dramatically, and they haven't spoken to one another in about 6 years.
In around 2012, Jered left Missouri and he and Kelsey moved to California, and it was there that Jered became known as Jered Threatin and had a grand plan to be world famous.
He had an Instagram presence, Facebook for sure. He had, I think, 40,000 likes on Facebook. He had tens of thousands of views on his videos on YouTube. YouTube is obviously more important for musicians than maybe an average person in terms of showing that people are interested in your music.
The videos Jered Threatin posted on his YouTube channel appeared to do well, like this one for the song Living is Dying.
I lie awake at night, just buried in my mind.
Posted in 2016, it currently has over 1.3 million views. And there are lots of other videos on there too. Video teasers, album previews, and behind-the-scenes videos showing him playing guitar, bass guitar, and drums. And all of those videos have tens of thousands of views. For any small band starting out, getting thousands of views would be welcome. But in this case, most of them were allegedly fake. Jered Threatin yearned for fame in a way that wasn't like most people.
He has sort of a laser-like focus when it comes to achieving this goal of international rock star fame. And you get that from him when you meet him. You know, he has an intensity about him where you're sort of like, okay, I understand how you were able to do, it seems essentially nothing but this for the last 2 years, roughly.
Jered Threatin was prepared to do whatever it took to show the world what he could do. And that meant taking some very extreme measures. In order to become a world-famous rock star, you need people to know about you. We've seen it in countless films. You write and record, then send the demos off to radio stations and record labels. You would play to small crowds in your hometown consisting of friends and family who politely applaud you. You live in the hope that perhaps one day, while you played a gig, you'd be spotted by a record company executive who would sign you there and then. You would have major label backing, get to record albums in proper studios and go on tours, and soon the world would know your name. But back in the real world, having a wide social media presence is now a big part of that journey to success. Jered Threatin recognised the power of a world online. He created a website for a fake record label, Superlative Music Recordings, complete with a fake history of the company. There was also a fake booking agency called Stage Right, so it was easy for him to convince people towards the end of last year that a Threatin European tour called Breaking the World was about to happen. In reality, Jered was the only member of his band Threatin, but for an international tour, he needed other musicians. So he hired drummer Dane Davis, another guitarist Joe Prunera, and this man who Jessica spoke to.
Hello, I'm Gavin Carney, and I was the bass player for Jered Threatin on the Breaking the World tour.
At the end of 2018, all the social media accounts owned and run by Jered Threatin were on overload, promoting a UK tour. Gavin Carney and the other musicians believed that this was going to be a huge break for them, and although they understood Threatin was not a super famous group, they thought because he had a label behind him and a record deal, he was the real deal, and they were willing to attach themselves to him in the hope that it would help them in their respective careers. They travelled to the UK, not really knowing what to expect.
I don't know, just like for me, it was like my first time going on tours, my first time going out of the US as far as overseas, and it was just kind of like, I don't know, it was exciting. I don't know how else to describe it.
Gavin didn't know a lot about Jered Threatin other than what he'd seen online. He says he was contacted by somebody by email after they'd seen one of his videos.
So walk me through the tour a little bit.
You know, the first gig, there wasn't a lot of people. I think there was like 6. But, you know, I didn't really think much of it. The next gig, I don't remember the name of the place. But that one, there wasn't a lot. I don't think. At first, there were a few people. By the end of it, I don't think there was anybody. So that was kind of, it was disappointing, but I didn't really think much beyond that. You know, it's just like we're on tour. I don't know what to expect. You know, we're in a different country. I don't know what his presence here is. You know, it's just like, you know, is what it is.
It was here that Gavin began to have suspicions that something didn't feel quite right. They had numerous dates at small venues where hundreds of tickets were supposedly sold, but no one turned up and the gig was empty. Sometimes the 4 or 5 people who were watching were the support band. Like a band called Loot, who shared a video of Threatin performing to an empty venue in Manchester on their YouTube channel. Many music artists will tell you that it isn't unusual to play to empty venues when you're starting out, so stories about a band on a poorly attended tour didn't seem out of the ordinary. That is, until bartender Jonathan Minto at a venue called The Exchange in Bristol in the UK did a bit of internet sleuthing. He and some of his colleagues watched the clip that appeared to show Threatin playing to a sold-out crowd in an arena somewhere. Except in that grainy footage, they saw that neither Jered Threatin or any of the band ever appeared in the same shot as the throngs of fans in the pit. The video was a fake. It had been spliced together from other footage. Threatin had never played to more than a handful of people. The next morning, Jonathan Minto posted a long Facebook message laying out everything he'd found out the previous night, thinking his friends in the music industry would enjoy his post and have a laugh. He wrote,
"It was a bit weird to find out that the promoter was still in Hollywood instead of being at the gig. Slightly weirder that we hadn't sold any tickets through the venue at all. It really seemed weird when the only people to arrive were the support band's guest list."
Jonathan said Threatin the band had been asked to pay for the venue's hire and staff costs before they could go on and play. He said Jered had had to go to an ATM machine to withdraw cash and pay before the show could continue.
Just when you think you've seen and heard it all, something like this comes along. Truly amazing stuff.
That post went viral, and soon it started making headlines.
When no one would come through the door, the venues were losing money and getting upset about it. So they started posting on social media. And then as more and more venues sort of chimed in and started saying, yeah, we had the same experience, journalists started noting that and saying, okay, this is getting kind of weird. A couple different journalists actually started looking at Threatin's website and at his label's website and at his booking agency's website and finding that they were obviously very cheaply made.
The jig was up. Jered Threatin's rock star fantasies were exposed.
Do they even exist? And ultimately, what we came to discover is that no, none of those people existed. Everyone who corresponded with Stage Right Bookings, which is Jered Threatin's booking agent, everyone who corresponded with his agent, including the band members who were completely in the dark about this, they were all corresponding with Jered himself or his wife, Kelsey, who was willing to hop on the phone and portray a female agent when need be.
After news came out that Threatin had fabricated his musical career, the rest of the European dates were cancelled. Shortly after returning to the US, Jessica went out to California to meet Jered and his wife, Kelsey. Jessica saw firsthand the very system Jered used to keep up the deceit.
I had to ask him, how did you keep this straight? And he sort of got down on his stomach in his bedroom and just pulled out all these notebooks that were underneath his bed. And they're just completely filled with notes about sort of the various fake people and what he'd done with them. Just, the fake email accounts that he created, the passwords for those accounts, and sort of which names he had linked to which, various social media platforms, which of them were defunct because he was cutting and pasting the same email into email blasts, and then eventually, Gmail or Facebook or someone flags that account and then says it's a spam account and shuts it down. He has to move on and create new entities. So he was very meticulous about pulling this off and dedicated an extraordinary amount of time to it. And he's quite proud of that. He's very proud of himself. And to a certain extent, sort of regardless of whether you think what he did was right and wrong, you have to admire that work ethic.
Jessica spoke to Jered for several hours over the course of a weekend, and they went back and forth on the phone and text both before and after the meeting. He confessed to everything and explained how he managed to fool so many people and bag himself a European tour. He set up fake accounts to praise his own music and weighed in on the comments sections about himself. There were the made-up grainy fan videos, the record deal, the booking agents, a supposed award, reviews, accolades. It was all made up. Jessica recorded her conversations with Jered Threatin, but he later told us we couldn't use them, which is why in this programme you're hearing from Threatin's bandmates and the people who knew him, but not Jered Threatin himself. But when he first spoke to Jessica Lussenhop, Jered Threatin was much more open.
I didn't get a whiff of self-consciousness about him. I didn't get any sense that he felt embarrassed or sorry or shamed. Obviously, that is due to the fact that he sort of, the whole point of having me out there was to reveal that he says he orchestrated this whole disaster, that this was sort of his plan from the very beginning.
And it's something that Jered Threatin maintains that he had planned, that every aspect of his career to date, including the exposé of the truth, was deliberate. To prove that he was indeed the one who tipped off the media to the hoax, he forwarded Jessica 16 different news tips to assorted outlets, including the Huffington Post, Rolling Stone, Variety, the New York Times, and to us here at the BBC. But crucially, Jessica checked with a number of those outlets to see when those emails were sent. Some of the reporters replied to say, yes, they'd received emails from Jered, but the dates didn't match. So, for instance, a reporter from the entertainment magazine Variety wrote back to Jessica saying he'd received an email from Jered and he attached a copy. But on closer inspection, the timestamp on Jered's copy was dated 2 weeks earlier. Jered had changed the dates on the emails that he had shown Jessica. He was caught in another lie. One of the last people to find out that Jered Threatin was a fake was his bass player, Gavin Carney. Jessica broke the news to him about the extent of the deception when they spoke.
So after talking to Jered and Kelsey, it appears that this is all just him, that none of these people existed. Joe doesn't exist. Casey Marshall doesn't exist. The booking companies don't exist. The label doesn't exist. Like, everything that sort of is out there, like, he pretty much said, like, yeah, it's all me. And this was sort of he's at least copping to, like, this is a hoax, essentially. I don't know. How does that land with you?
It's crazy. It's amazing if that's the case, that just the amount of lies he was able to keep track of and be able to consistently repeat. That's amazing to me that you could remember all that. It's pretty shocking because, like, just like, who do you trust? Like, he seems so honest and so forthcoming about everything, and just to hear something like that is pretty. I don't know. I'll just it's a shock, I guess.
When Jessica's story appeared on the BBC News website, she got a huge response.
I think people have reacted really strongly to this piece, and it makes them talk to me. I've heard from people who talk to me about great lies that they've been told in their lives, bad boyfriends, bad girlfriends, people who will look you in the eye and lie to you. It makes people think about what it is like to be so thoroughly fooled. And I think that's kind of an interesting response, and I think it's sort of this great equalizer that we're all capable of being just tricked, and that we want to believe certain things, and that it's really easy to get away with that if you have an audience that's hungry for a certain truth.
And how does all of that fit in with the story of Jered Threatin?
I mean, I think that in a sense, this kicked off because so many people wanted to point and laugh at Jered Threatin and say, what an idiot. He flew too close to the sun, and what an idiot, and what a fool, and we're all smarter than him, and we've figured him out. And then he kind of tried to come back and say, aha, no, I've tricked you. I'm laughing at you. It's just a bunch of people standing around pointing and laughing at each other. Like, we're all so eager to laugh at each other and be smarter than one another, especially when it comes to social media. And I think this is a situation where at the end of the day, it's like, it's not really clear who is the fool. And ultimately, he got the attention he wanted.
In a way, you could say that Jered Threatin's quest to be famous worked out in the end. There were numerous reports on his story around the world, so he's now well known, although perhaps not for the reasons that he wanted. So I asked Jessica, with all the exposure, did he win?
We're talking about him now. I went out and met him at his house. I did the kind of profile that you would do for a legitimate rock star, where you go to their home and you play with their cats and describe what they're having to drink and things like that. He got everything that he wanted in terms of the attention. I think that he successfully pointed out a lot of flaws with how the music industry works in terms of who gets booked and who gets attention.
Jered Threatin told Rolling Stone magazine that there was no way he was going to get enough attention being a rock star in 2018. He said, "Unless I did something to get people to pay attention." And what happens now? Well, Threatin is going to return to the same venue in London, the Underworld, this November for a one-off gig titled Re-Breaking the Underworld, which, if it needs explaining, is in reference to last year's failed tour. How many people will show up to see him this year remains to be seen. My thanks to the BBC's Jessica Lussenhop, and if you want to read Jessica's story, then search for A Conversation with a False Rock God. That's it for the BBC Trending podcast this week. My thanks also to production manager Shannon McCormack. Neil Churchill and Rod Farker recorded and mixed this episode. You can use any of our social media outlets, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, to get in touch, or if you want to message me with story ideas or your thoughts on this or any of our other episodes, then you can find me at the Anisa Subedar on Twitter.